everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Holland Land Office Museum's Artifact video series. My name is Ryan Duffy, and I'm the director of the museum. And this week we're going to talk about two religious items that we have here at the museum that actually go back to older churches in Genesee County's history. So we have two large stained glass windows that were in two different churches throughout the county, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the history of those and sort of where they came from and show off the beauty of them. So the first one is behind me here, and this church window came from St. Luke's Episcopal Society Church, which was located in Corfu. Now the church is no longer in existence as it folded in 1944, but it was one of the many churches in the village of Corfu. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the history of the church so I can also show you some up-close pictures of the window. St. Luke's Protestant Episcopal Society was organized in May 1876 when services held by Reverend J. Cook in Corfu, right in the village. The denomination grew, and on June 14, 1880, the cornerstone of the church, which seated 125 people, was set by Bishop Cox, and a class was confirmed on that day. The society was formed through the efforts of the members of the St. James Episcopal Church at Batavia. The church operated for years as a mission without a resident pastor. As the congregation decreased, the church was eventually forced to dissolve in 1944, and the building was sold and remodeled into an apartment house. The building was located at the south of the four corners on the west side of Allegheny Street, so this is the corners of Route 77 and Route 33 in Corfu, and the building stands today, though it is still an apartment building and looks as such. Now the second window we had actually came from St. Paul's Lutheran Church, which actually was located in three separate locations here in Batavia. But the window that we have actually came from its second iteration, which was located on Liberty Street. It was built in 1898, but was torn down in 1973 after the church had moved to a new location. So I'm going to go more into the history of this church and show you some pictures of its previous iterations, as well as some more pictures of the stained glass window. St. Paul's Lutheran Church was organized by a group of German families in Batavia in April 1871. For almost a year, the group met for worship in the Presbyterian Church on East Main Street while they looked for their own place of worship. They were able to find that the next year in 1872 when they built a small church building on the corners of Ellicott Street and Exchange Place. And at that time, they adopted the name the German Evangelical St. Paul's Church, and their first pastor was the Reverend George Feld. In the spring of 1898, the congregation voted to find a new meeting place. So they sold the building on Ellicott Street and purchased a lot on Liberty Street across from the Presbyterian Church. They broke ground there in August of 1898, and by December, they had put up a brick building with a little bell tower and turrets on the four corners. That same year, the building would eventually be completed, and the congregation left the Evangelical Association of North America and joined the Lutheran Church, becoming St. Paul's Lutheran Church. In 1901, they received their first church bell from Mrs. Catherine Bowl, who was a member of the church. And in 1908, they were able to actually burn the mortgage as they had paid almost $6,000 in order to build a new church. In 1936, they gained their longest-running Reverend Gilbert Oldson, and he would stay with the church for 40 years. As membership of the church grew, the Lutherans began to feel the need for a larger space and actually bought a tract of land on Washington Avenue that stretched back to Park Avenue. Here they would have space for a church building, a parsonage, and other possible building needs. They broke ground on the new spot in June of 1951 and laid the cornerstone of October that year. And the building would eventually be finished the following year in 1952. Now, in 1962, the congregation built a bell tower by the entrance and were promised by Charles Mancuso and Son, who bought the property in Liberty, that they would be able to bring the bell back to where it belonged at the new church. And local construction company was able to actually make that happen very soon after. Now, the old church on Liberty was eventually demolished in 1973. But the church grew and actually opened up a church school, starting with preschool program in the 1960s, but by 1998 they increased that to elementary school programming as well, which they still have today. Well, I hope you enjoyed this edition of the Holland Land Office Museum and enjoyed looking at the beauty of the church stained glass windows that we have and learned a little bit more about the history of those churches as well. In case you've missed any of our previous videos, you can check them out on our channel, Holland Land Office Museum on YouTube, and they're all in a single playlist, so you can go back and check out all of them. And if you like anything, be sure to give them a like or even subscribe to the channel, as it helps us out a little bit, but it also gets you notified even quicker when we do release new videos. But as always, the best way to come and learn more about these artifacts and the stories of Genesee County is to come visit us in person at the museum, and we'd be happy to share even more information with you and give you an up-close and personal look at things.